With almost all schools back in session, U.S. Education Secretary Miguel Cardona wrapped up a multi-state back-to-school tour last week. The tour including several visits to schools across Wisconsin to talk about teacher retention and academic success. I sat down with the Secretary Cardona for a one-on-one interview to talk about the challenges impacting school districts and how his department is supporting higher education. And here with me on the show today is U.S. Secretary of Education Miguel Cardona. Secretary Cardona, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you. Glad to be with you.
So I want to start off talking a little bit about the fact that the latest Marquette Law School poll shows that registered voters in Wisconsin were dissatisfied with the public schools in their community. That's down from the 63% that we saw of people who were asked in October of last year. People have questioned whether public schools should be funded federally. They've questioned the role of the Department of Education. What is your response?
Okay, I wouldn't be here if it weren't for a public school and what it offered across our country. I would argue that the growth of our country and our competitive ability to compete internationally is dependent on how strong our public schools are. And you're right. And one of the reasons why I'm here and kicking off the back-to-school tour here is because you have a governor that understands the importance of education, Superintendent Jill Underly as well. But public education is under attack. And you know what we're seeing in not only Wisconsin but across the country and some states is that they want to take funding from a public school that is already underfunded. Teachers are paid 26% less than people with similar degrees. They want to take money from those underfunded schools, put them into private tuitions, and then they wonder why there are less resources to meet the needs of students. But I am pleased to say that here in this great state, the recovery of academic proficiency in students is something to be proud of. Students have recovered pre-pandemic loss in reading. They're not quite there yet in math, but I know that a focus on supporting public education is what's going to get them there.
Secretary, that is a great segue into my next question. Looking at the challenges that Wisconsin public schools across the country are facing in terms of retention among their educational staff, some of those financial hardships that we're seeing across the country, how are you working to address those issues?
No, that's a great question. And, you know, I have to say I visited 3 schools today in this the Badger State, and the energy, the positive sense of community, it was palpable. So I know that the educators that you do have here want to be here. But the reality is, across the country, you know, we talk a lot about teacher shortage. You know, for the last several years, there's always been stories about teacher shortage. I look at the teacher shortage we have in our country as a symptom of a teacher respect issue. You know, it's such a great profession. I was a 4th grade teacher myself, and it really is a great profession, but for far too long we've normalized in this country that teachers have to get a second job to make ends meet. You know, in over 20 states in this country, teachers qualify for state assistance. That's unacceptable. It's unacceptable. I wonder if the profession was 75% male, would we have those issues? So we need to lift up the teaching profession, support our educators, not just teachers, paraeducators, folks that serve our children, right? Everyone that we called essential 4 years ago.
Secretary, you obviously are not here to just talk about public schools. You also are here to talk about the work being done for higher education as well. So I want to switch gears and ask you, student loan debt relief has been a large part of the conversation, but how is the administration addressing the root cause of college affordability to help mitigate that issue?
That's a great question, and we are proud that in Wisconsin alone, $2.3 billion has been provided in debt relief. And those $2.3 billion go back into the local economy. An example of that is a teacher who is serving her community, who is now free from college debt when she went to school and now can invest in a small business, help her children go to college, buy a home, right? So we're proud that the money comes back into the community here. But you're right. Higher education has become out of reach for so many students. So we have a 2-pronged approach. We're increasing accountability in the higher education space. So we want to make sure that parents and students see the return on investment that they're going to be getting with the schools, and we're increasing transparency, right? And we're also holding schools accountable for an education that they provide students where they're not going to be making a lot of money. We've actually gone after for-profit institutions that are preying on students. So that's approach number one. Approach number two is one that I'm really fond of because I went to a technical high school. There are so many options for students who maybe say, you know, I want to go to a 2-year college and learn a trade or get a credential. Thanks to President Biden and Vice President Harris, there are millions of new careers that are going to be available, whether it's the infrastructure plan, CHIPS and Science Act. There's so many more careers that are going to be available. We don't need a 4-year degree, and you can make really good money. So we want to make sure that we're preparing students for those tracks as well. That'll provide the competition for the 4-year colleges to make themselves realize, if I don't, number one, make it more of a value, and if I don't adapt, then I'm going to be out of the loop. So we're holding colleges accountable, but we're also providing more pathways for students to reach their goals.
The Supreme Court banned affirmative action last year. It impacted colleges and universities from meeting those specific quotas to address diversity and equal opportunity goals. Some have argued that students of color performed at lower rates than their white counterparts, but the data shows that this is really a conversation about access, addressing those racial disparities, the systemic barriers to ensure that kids of all backgrounds have the same educational opportunities. How is the Department of Education tackling that issue through the public school system?
Well, first of all, the Supreme Court, I believe, got it wrong. And we're starting to see in some schools less students of color having access already. So kudos to those college leaders that said we got to do something about it. Strategies across the country are being employed to ensure that all students have access. And this is why we're fighting for public education. Public education is the great equalizer. When you have a court that's going backwards, we as public educators have to do more to make sure that all kids, all kids, and especially kids from underrepresented groups or kids that maybe feel like they never had a chance, including rural students here, you do have the potential to make it. And when you have well-supported public education schools, well-supported educators, you see the potential in the country, you see the potential in the community. That's why we're here on this tour. To negate some of the negative impact of what I believe the Supreme Court got wrong. But we're going to keep fighting.
U.S. Secretary of Education Miguel Cardona, thank you so much for being with us today.
Good to be with you. Thank you.